Before we get started, hit the comments and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is over there. Whether you're catching sunrise in Nairobi, burning midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to hear from you. Don't just watch silently, let me know where in the world you are. Now let's dive into the story. The clang of metal echoed through the high-ceilinged barracks as Sergeant Roderick's boots thudded against the worn concrete. The room was tense, the air thick with sweat, gun oil, and nervous energy. Every soldier was frozen mid-task, shoving gear into lockers, sharpening bayonets, or reviewing tactical maps, when the door creaked open. In stepped a woman. Not in uniform. Not carrying weapons or rank. She wore a faded janitor's jumpsuit, the blue fabric fraying at the sleeves. Her mop bucket squeaked across the floor, but there was a strange weight in her presence, like the air itself recognized her. One by one the soldiers stopped, eyes widening, spines straightening. Every man and woman stood immediately, hands clasped behind backs, rifles momentarily forgotten. Lieutenant Harkins, mid-sentence giving orders, froze. His brow furrowed as he watched the newcomer sweep past, eyes scanning the room with a calm precision that seemed impossible for someone in her position. It wasn't fear exactly, it was respect, awe even. There was a history written in the way the soldiers stiffened, a silent acknowledgement that this woman was no ordinary janitor. The air seemed to hum with anticipation, every heartbeat loud enough to echo off the cinderblock walls. Roderick stepped forward, clearing his throat, trying to mask his disbelief. "Ma'am, welcome to the base," he said. The words felt hollow, almost inadequate. The janitor gave a small nod, her expression unreadable, her eyes scanning the barracks with quiet authority. There was a tension in her stance, a coiled energy that suggested both patience and lethal efficiency. Then, as if sensing the room's scrutiny, she paused, adjusting the mop handle, and finally spoke. Her voice was soft, deliberate, and carried an unspoken command. "I'm here to clean. But know this, I notice everything." Every soldier felt it, a chill crawling up their spine. She didn't move like someone low-ranking. She moved like someone who had walked through wars, survived impossible odds, and emerged unbroken. For a long moment, the barracks remained still, every rustle of fabric and clink of metal magnified in the thick silence. Some soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to be intimidated or relieved. Then came a faint smile, almost imperceptible, from one of the veterans near the back. Recognition. Understanding. They didn't just stand because she was a stranger. They stood because they knew, somehow, that every step she took carried history, pain, and command, and the room had no choice but to honor it. And just like that, the unassuming janitor had taken control, not with orders, not with a weapon, but with a presence that demanded discipline, respect, and attention. The soldiers would never see her as just a janitor again. The first whisper went around, "She's seen combat, real combat. And we're lucky she's on our side." Before the soldiers could settle, the janitor moved to the far corner of the barracks, dragging the mop with mechanical precision. Lieutenant Harkins watched her carefully, curiosity battling disbelief. The way she held herself, upright yet relaxed, made him uneasy. There was an almost imperceptible rhythm to her movements, as if she were reading the room, calculating potential threats in every flicker of the fluorescent lights. Her name, it turned out, was Kayla Myrick. But very few in the military community knew that name. To the public, she was just another civilian worker. Yet whispers had followed her for years, rumors of operations that had gone unseen by any chain of command, missions so covert that even the CIA only half-documented them. She had disappeared from formal duty after an incident overseas, one that had left a string of debriefs, medals, and unanswered questions in her wake. The soldiers, meanwhile, couldn't ignore the small details. The way her boots were scuffed but polished. The subtle tremor of her right hand when she set down the mop, not from weakness but from muscle memory honed under stress. Her eyes scanned the room in short, deliberate sweeps, memorizing each face, each weapon, each piece of equipment. It was unsettling, like watching a predator silently sizing up a room full of prey. Sergeant Roderick approached cautiously, voice low. "Ma'am, I didn't know you'd be here today. Wasn't this scheduled for next week?" Kayla didn't look up immediately. "Schedules change," she said softly. Her gaze finally settled on him, piercing through the fluorescent haze. "And when they do, I'm ready." The words hung in the air. Simple, yet they carried the weight of experience that no soldier could ignore. Roderick felt his chest tighten. Something about the cadence of her voice made his jaw lock. He realized, almost with a shiver, that she wasn't merely a janitor. She was someone who had walked through fire, who had survived what no one else could, and who had returned to a place that expected her to be ordinary. That evening, as Kayla began her work in the quiet, dimly lit hallways, memories tugged at her mind. Afghanistan 2012, the convoy ambushed at dusk, sand whipping against sweat-streaked skin, the screams of comrades echoing in the canyons. The moment she had made a choice that saved lives but had forced her to vanish into obscurity afterward. She had come to this base not as a hero seeking recognition, but as someone seeking a semblance of normalcy, yet unaware that the soldiers themselves would demand her extraordinary presence. Down the hall, Private Lewis whispered to his bunkmate, "Why does everyone stand when she walks by?" It's not just respect," the other muttered. "It's fear. And something else. Something I can't put into words." Kayla paused in the dim light, mop dripping silently, and glanced over her shoulder, hearing snippets of their whispered speculation. She smiled faintly, a ghost of her past confidence, the kind that had made enemies hesitate and allies trust blindly. Here, in this quiet barracks, she was ready to be ordinary. But the soldiers would never allow it. By the time she finished her shift, the barracks had fallen silent again, but the air carried a new tension, a quiet, unspoken acknowledgement that Kayla Myrick was no ordinary janitor. And somewhere deep inside, she felt the first hint of anticipation. Because soon this quiet respect would be tested. The next morning, the barracks buzzed with the usual military chaos. Boots clanging on metal racks, radios crackling static, and the faint smell of coffee and gun oil mixing in the air. Yet there was an unusual ripple beneath it all, a quiet energy that none of the soldiers could ignore. Kayla Myrick, the janitor, moved methodically through the room, her mop squeaking in rhythm with her heartbeat. Every step, every sweep was deliberate, precise. She wasn't just cleaning, she was observing, memorizing, calculating. Private Lewis, still unnerved by her presence, leaned toward his bunkmate, whispering, "Did you see how she watched Roderick yesterday? Like she knew something we don't." His friend shrugged, eyes wide. "Yeah, like she's always ready for something." It was true. Kayla's posture radiated quiet authority. Not rank, not status, but a lived experience that demanded attention. She passed near Lieutenant Harkins, who was scribbling notes for a training drill. He tried to mask his unease, but his hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his uniform. He'd seen soldiers falter under lesser authority, yet here was a civilian, unarmed, who made the strongest among them pause. Later that day, the drill began on the training field. Soldiers sprinted across mud-slicked terrain, dodged simulated gunfire, and executed maneuvers with tense precision. Kayla appeared at the edge of the field, mop bucket in hand, incongruously out of place. Yet the moment she stepped onto the sidelines, soldiers stood straighter, breaths sharper, movements sharper. Even the drill sergeant, grizzled and loud, glanced at her with a flicker of caution. Harkins noticed a small tattoo peeking from her sleeve, a set of coordinates. He had seen numbers like that before, marking battle zones, ambush points, or locations where history had been forged in fire. Kayla's eyes scanned the field, noting weaknesses in form, lapses in attention, and silent hesitation among the troops. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her presence alone was enough to sharpen their instincts, to awaken the discipline they sometimes allowed to slacken. That night, Kayla sat alone in the dim cafeteria, the fluorescent lights flickering over empty tables. She sipped lukewarm coffee, her eyes tracing the movements of soldiers cleaning their weapons in the background. Memories came unbidden. The ambush in Kandahar, the convoy that had burned, the orders that had saved some and sacrificed others. She carried their ghosts in the lines of her face, in the taut muscles of her neck, in the precise movements of her hands. Private Lewis, brave enough to approach, broke the silence. "Ma'am, do you ever fight?" His voice was hesitant, almost afraid. Kayla lifted her eyes slowly, gaze cold but not unkind. "I fought," she said softly. "More than you'll ever know. But fighting isn't always with weapons. Sometimes it's just surviving long enough to make a difference." The words sank deep into the young soldier's chest, heavy with meaning. Kayla didn't ask for admiration or fear. She merely existed as a force that commanded both. As the soldiers left the cafeteria that night, a whisper spread among them. She's not just cleaning the base, she's watching, remembering, preparing, and somewhere deep in Kayla's mind, a quiet anticipation grew. Because soon, observation would no longer be enough. Soon, action would be required, and the base would never forget the day the janitor became more than anyone had imagined. The hum of the base at dawn was broken only by the wind rattling the old barracks windows. Kayla Myrick moved silently through the empty hallways, mop bucket dragging softly behind her. In the quiet, memories clawed at her relentless. Afghanistan 2012, the convoy, the sand, the sudden eruption of gunfire. She had been younger then, faster, but no less aware of the thin line between life and death. She had seen friends fall, their screams swallowed by the desert night, and made choices that haunted her every waking hour. Back on the base now, she felt ghosts everywhere. Not just the literal ones of her past operations, but the living ghosts, the soldiers who had no idea of the burdens they carried, the lives they could lose, the mistakes that would follow them home. Her presence was deliberate. She had returned to teach them discipline in subtle ways, to awaken instincts that some had forgotten existed. Sergeant Roderick walked past her mop bucket, pretending not to notice her gaze. He had served for over a decade, witnessed disasters no civilian should ever imagine, and yet Kayla unsettled him. There was a sharpness in her eyes, a precision in her posture, that suggested she had lived in danger longer than most had breathed. Her history was a quiet threat, and he felt it in the way his spine stiffened without conscious thought. Later in the mess hall, whispers of her past grew louder. Soldiers shared fragments of stories they had heard in hushed tones. Myrick led a strike against a high-value target in Kandahar. She walked away alone when the intel failed. She disappeared for years and returned quietly. Few knew the truth, and even fewer would ever understand the breadth of her experience. Kayla, sitting alone at a corner table, caught a shadow moving in her peripheral vision. It was Private Lewis, curiosity written across his young face. "Ma'am, did you really fight alone? I mean, like all of you versus them?" She looked at him, expression unreadable, the cafeteria lights reflecting in her sharp eyes. "Sometimes it's not the number of people you have. Sometimes it's the choices you make that decide who survives." She paused, stirring her coffee slowly. "And sometimes, survival comes at a cost you can't measure until it's too late." He nodded, swallowing, understanding in a way words could never capture. The young soldiers didn't yet realize that Kayla's presence was both a shield and a warning. She carried the weight of countless missions, impossible decisions, and unspoken tragedies. She wasn't here to boast or intimidate, she was here to prepare them for the unseen dangers of the world outside the base. As the sun set over the training field, painting the sky in bruised purples and reds, Kayla stepped outside. The wind tugged at her hair, carrying the scent of dust and metal. She watched the soldiers from afar, noting posture, readiness, and hesitation. Her mind flashed to moments past: ambushes, firefights, friends lost, victories tainted by sacrifice. Each memory was a silent promise. She would never allow this group to be caught unprepared. And deep down, a quiet resolve formed. She had returned not to fade into the background, not to be a janitor unnoticed. She had returned to ensure the soldiers under her watch would survive what she could not forget, and when the moment came they would know exactly who she was. The barracks had never felt smaller. Soldiers moved through the narrow corridors like ghosts, their eyes flicking toward Kayla as if she could see through walls. The training ground beyond the compound was alive with motion. Boots pounding mud, rifles clattering, and the sharp commands of drill sergeants slicing through the cold morning air. Yet beneath the disciplined surface, fractures were forming. Private Lewis struggled to keep pace with the more experienced recruits. His hands shook as he adjusted the strap of his rifle, sweat stinging his eyes. Kayla's presence lingered in his mind, a shadowed reminder that judgment was constant, precise, and unavoidable. She didn't need to speak. Her silent evaluation cut deeper than any shouted order. Meanwhile, Sergeant Roderick noticed tension simmering elsewhere. Corporal Mendez, long favored by the commanding officers, scowled as he watched Lewis falter. Jealousy, pride, and fear tangled in his chest. Mendez had always been top of his class, the one others looked up to, but Kayla disrupted everything. She treated every soldier equally, yet with an intensity that exposed weakness, hesitation, and untested courage. On the training field, Kayla moved with surprising ease for someone dressed in a janitor's jumpsuit. She passed behind rows of soldiers executing maneuvers, correcting posture here, adjusting grip there, all without a word. Her eyes caught every misstep, an unsteady stance, a flinch that revealed fear, the micro-movements of exhaustion. Soldiers stiffened under her gaze, their previous confidence cracking like ice underfoot. The whispers started again. "Do you see how she watches us?" one recruit asked another, voice low. She knows, she knows." By mid-afternoon, the tension had built into something nearly tangible. A routine drill turned chaotic when a misfired weapon startled a group of soldiers. Lewis froze, heart racing, and Roderick moved to steady him. But Kayla's voice, calm yet commanding, cut through the panic. "Move. Adjust. Focus. Every head snapped toward her. There was no anger in her tone, no judgment, just authority. Soldiers shifted immediately, as if her presence had reset the entire room. Lewis realized in that instant that Kayla's power wasn't in brute force or rank. It was in the unwavering certainty of someone who had survived impossible odds and expected others to rise to the occasion, or face the consequences. Even Mendez flinched, his arrogance momentarily eclipsed by respect tinged with fear. He realized the quiet truth. Kayla saw everything, anticipated every misstep, and tolerated nothing less than excellence. The field felt smaller, the mud heavier, and every heartbeat louder under her watch. As the day ended, Kayla stood alone at the edge of the field, mop bucket at her side, her silhouette framed by the sinking sun. Soldiers passed her silently, some stealing glances, others avoiding eye contact, all aware that their ordinary routines had been shattered. Lewis lingered a moment longer, breathing hard, chest tight with something he couldn't name. Kayla's gaze swept across the field one last time. She wasn't here to punish, she was here to test, prepare, and awaken. But a quiet warning echoed in every corner of the base. Survival demanded attention, courage, and awareness. Those who failed to grasp it would pay a price. And Kayla Myrick, the unassuming janitor, would make sure no one forgot. Night had fallen over the base, casting long shadows across the barracks. The fluorescent lights flickered sporadically, and the hum of distant generators filled the silence. Kayla Myrick sat in the corner of the empty training hall, mop bucket set aside. She traced the scratches on the floor with her eyes, memories unraveling in the quiet. It had been Kandahar, 2012, a mission that had gone sideways before the first bullet was fired. Her unit had been tasked with securing a high-value target, intelligence critical to preventing an ambush on a convoy. But halfway through, the plan crumbled. The enemy knew their moves, and in minutes, chaos erupted. Explosions tore through the night, screams shredded the air, and Kayla's instincts took over. She had moved like water through fire, dragging the injured, neutralizing threats with precise strikes, and making split-second decisions that weighed dozens of lives against one choice, hers. By dawn, the survivors had retreated, the target lost, and Kayla alone had guided enough to safety to make her actions heroic and haunted. She had saved lives, but at the cost of leaving others behind, a choice she replayed every night. Back in the present, the barracks remained quiet, but Kayla felt the pull of those ghosts. Every young soldier under her watch reminded her of them, fearful, untested, unprepared. And every lapse she observed brought back the nagging truth: she could not allow history to repeat. Discipline wasn't just a routine, it was a shield against chaos, a weapon she wielded silently. Private Lewis approached hesitantly, the weight of the day heavy on his shoulders. "Ma'am, why do you care so much?" His voice trembled, the rawness of youth shining through. Kayla looked at him, eyes dark yet gentle, and for a moment, the soldier saw the depth behind her presence. "Because someone has to. Because knowing what's coming and ignoring it isn't an option. You think cleaning floors is ordinary? No. Every step, every sweep, every observation is a preparation. You may not see it now, but every movement you make under pressure can mean the difference between life and death." Lewis swallowed, heart pounding. He could almost see the battlefield she described, the sand, the smoke, the chaos, and the weight of responsibility pressed down on him. Kayla wasn't just teaching discipline, she was transferring the invisible armor forged in blood and fire, piece by piece, to soldiers who would face danger one day. In the dark, Roderick watched from the doorway, unease twisting in his gut. He realized something uncomfortable. Kayla's authority didn't come from orders, rank, or intimidation. It came from experience, from surviving the unspeakable, and from the quiet intensity that could spot hesitation faster than a radar could detect a threat. Even the bravest among them, veterans who had survived firefights, stiffened in her presence because they knew, she had walked through hell and returned whole, and expected them to rise to her standard, That night, as the soldiers slept, Kayla remained vigilant. Outside, the wind whipped through the perimeter fences, carrying dust and the faint scent of gun oil. She thought of her mission in Kandahar, the choices made, the lives lost, and the promise she had silently made. She would ensure that those under her watch would never falter when real danger arrived. And when the moment came, they would know why. Every soldier stood immediately when she entered the room. The morning sun burned through the fog, turning the training field into a battlefield of mud and sweat. Kayla Myrick stood at the edge, mop bucket abandoned, watching as soldiers ran drills under the watchful eye of Sergeant Roderick. Today was different. She had sensed it from the moment the first boot hit the ground. Nerves frayed, tempers flaring, mistakes mounting. Private Lewis faltered again, tripping over uneven ground. Corporal Mendez snapped, yelling accusations, his jealousy boiling over. "Focus, rookie. Are you even trying?" His words cut sharper than any drill sergeant's command. Other soldiers stiffened, uncertain whether to intervene or stay silent. The tension was a powder keg, and Kayla's gaze settled on Mendez with quiet intensity. Then it happened. A training mishap, a misfired blank, a scattering of equipment, sent the soldiers scrambling, fear mixing with adrenaline. Lewis froze, heart pounding. Kayla didn't flinch. She stepped forward, moving like a shadow, her voice slicing through the chaos. "Down. Now." Her command was not a request, it was absolute. Soldiers hit the ground instinctively, rifles clutched, muscles tensed, and even Mendez halted mid-yell, eyes wide. Kayla moved among them, correcting posture, calming panic, and repositioning Lewis with a firm hand. The chaos melted under her authority. Once the drill ended, Kayla addressed the assembled soldiers. Her tone was calm, but each word landed like a hammer. Discipline is not about rank. It's not about fear. It's about surviving when the world is at its worst. Every hesitation you show here could cost lives out there. She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the group. And hesitation will not be tolerated. Mendez bristled, the sting of embarrassment igniting a silent rage. "Who does she think she is?" he muttered to Roderick, who only shook his head. Kayla had exposed weakness, forced accountability, and even the best soldiers had faltered under her scrutiny. Later, in the quiet of the barracks, Lewis approached Kayla. "Ma'am, I don't get it. You make us feel like we're being judged all the time." His voice wavered, a mix of awe and fear. Kayla looked at him, her eyes softening ever so slightly. "You are being judged. By someone who has lived and survived the worst. I will not waste my attention on anyone who cannot rise to the challenge. But judgment is only the beginning. Discipline, preparation, courage, that is what keeps you alive." Outside, the wind picked up, rustling through the perimeter fences. Shadows of soldiers running drills stretched long across the muddy field. Kayla watched, sensing potential fractures in morale, jealousy, and fear, but also the sparks of courage, resilience, and loyalty. She knew the breaking point had arrived. And in the chaos of tomorrow's challenge, those sparks would either ignite or extinguish under pressure. In the barracks, whispers traveled fast. "She's not just a janitor," one soldier muttered. "She's everything we're not." Kayla cleaned quietly that night, mop moving rhythmically across the floor, a calm eye in the storm. She had tested them, revealed weaknesses, and planted the seeds for their transformation. The first real trial was approaching, and the soldiers would have no choice but to rise, or face the consequences. And somewhere deep inside, Kayla felt it, the stirring of what was coming. She had prepared for this moment for years, and soon, every soldier would witness why they stood the instant she entered a room. The sun had barely risen when the alarm blared across the base, piercing the pre-dawn calm. Soldiers leapt from their bunks, hearts hammering. Smoke curled from the far edge of the compound, dark against the pale sky. This was no drill. Kayla Myrick was already moving, mop abandoned, her eyes scanning the perimeter with cold precision. "Form up. Defensive positions." Sergeant Roderick barked, though his voice carried a note of uncertainty he didn't usually allow. Soldiers snapped to attention, adrenaline flooding their veins. Kayla strode past them, unarmed yet commanding absolute control. Every man and woman followed her gaze, recognizing the unmistakable signs of a real threat. At the perimeter, a group of insurgents had breached the outer fence, cutting through sensors and forcing a confrontation. Lewis's hands shook as he gripped his rifle. Kayla stepped beside him, adjusting his stance with a firm hand. "Come. Observe. Anticipate. Hesitation will get you killed," she said. Her voice was steel wrapped in ice, but within it was a pulse of encouragement that forced courage into even the most terrified soldiers. The insurgents advanced, gunfire cracking like thunder. Chaos erupted as the soldiers returned fire, the air thick with smoke, dust, and the acrid scent of spent gunpowder. Kayla moved with uncanny precision, guiding movements, issuing orders silently that carried more authority than any shouting sergeant. Each step was calculated, every glance a command that soldiers instinctively followed. Mendez, previously brimming with arrogance, faltered under the sudden pressure. Kayla caught his hesitation with a sharp gaze, moving beside him. "Focus. You're better than this," she said. The words were simple, but the confidence behind them transformed him. He squared his shoulders, adjusted his aim, and became a force within the chaos. Lewis ducked behind cover, heart pounding, when a bullet zipped past, embedding in the wall inches from his helmet. Kayla didn't flinch. She guided him forward, crouched beside him as they advanced toward the intruders. "Fear is part of the fight," she whispered. "Let it sharpen, not paralyze." Minutes stretched like hours as the battle raged. Soldiers moved with growing confidence, reacting with the precision Kayla had drilled into them over weeks. Every maneuver, every shot, every decision reflected her unseen hand. She wasn't just leading, they were evolving under her watch, transforming fear into control, hesitation into skill. Finally, the insurgents broke, retreating into the surrounding forest. The soldiers exhaled, adrenaline giving way to exhaustion. Kayla stood in the clearing, mop bucket at her feet as if it had always belonged there, surveying the aftermath. No one spoke immediately. The silence was heavy, thick with awe, relief, and disbelief. Lewis finally breathed out, voice trembling. "Ma'am, we did it." Kayla's eyes softened just enough to reveal the faintest trace of a smile. "No, you did it. I only showed you how to survive." She looked across the field at soldiers standing taller, eyes sharper, hearts steadier. "Remember this. Every time you face fire, every time you think you can't move forward, you already have what it takes. You just need to trust it." That night the barracks felt different. The soldiers moved with a quiet pride, their respect for Kayla unspoken but absolute. They had been tested, faced real danger, and survived. But Kayla knew the true test wasn't over. Lessons of courage, discipline, and trust would echo long after the smoke cleared, and the final trial of the story was still ahead. The base was eerily quiet at dawn. The morning mist clung to the training field, shrouding everything in gray silence. Soldiers moved cautiously, nerves taut, sensing a storm yet to arrive. Kayla Myrick stood at the perimeter, mop bucket long forgotten, eyes scanning the treeline. Something was coming, something bigger than the skirmish from yesterday. The first shots rang out before anyone could fully react. A larger, more organized force of insurgents had returned, this time cutting a swath toward the barracks. Chaos erupted instantly, boots thundering, rifles cocked, adrenaline surging. Lewis froze for a heartbeat, but Kayla's sharp voice sliced through the panic. "Move! Cover! Now!" The soldiers obeyed instinctively. Every drill, every lesson Kayla had drilled into them now mattered more than ever. Mendez, transformed by Kayla's guidance, led a flank, moving with precision and confidence that few expected from him. The younger soldiers followed orders without hesitation, eyes wide but hearts steady, their fear channeled into purpose. Amid the firefight, Kayla noticed a soldier struggling, Private Alvarez pinned behind a barricade, trembling as bullets zipped past. Without a second thought, she sprinted across open ground, weaving through the hail of gunfire. In a single motion, she dragged Alvarez to safety, her body tense, every muscle coiled like a spring. She didn't pause, didn't falter. She simply acted. As the insurgents breached the inner perimeter, Kayla moved through the chaos like a shadow. She coordinated the soldiers with quiet commands, pointing, signaling, and positioning them strategically. It wasn't brute force, it was experience, intuition, and authority distilled into every movement. The soldiers, once uncertain and fractured, were now a cohesive unit, operating with lethal precision under her guidance. Suddenly, a grenade landed near Lewis. Time slowed. Kayla's hand shot out, grabbing him and rolling them both behind a wall of concrete just as it detonated. The shockwave rattled the ground, dust and debris filling the air. Lewis's heart raced, his chest pounding. He looked at her, and for the first time he truly understood what it meant when every soldier stood immediately when she entered a room. By mid-morning the insurgents were overwhelmed. The soldiers, once hesitant and divided, had become a single, formidable force. Every movement, every shot, every decision reflected Kayla's influence. As the final intruders retreated into the forest, exhausted and defeated, a hush fell over the field. Kayla surveyed the soldiers, now scattered across mud-streaked terrain, their chests heaving, eyes wide with disbelief and triumph. "You've faced fear," she said, her voice calm, cutting through the aftershock. "You've faced chaos. And you survived, not because of me but because you trusted yourself. Remember this moment. Remember what discipline and courage can achieve." Roderick, watching from a distance, felt a surge of respect he couldn't contain. "She's incredible," he muttered. Mendez nodded silently, humility finally replacing arrogance. Lewis, shaking, whispered, I get it now. Every second she's here, it matters." Kayla's gaze swept the field one last time. She had tested them, forged them in fire, and now they had survived. But she didn't smile. Not yet. She knew the final lesson wasn't over. True strength wasn't measured by a single battle. It was forged in the choices soldiers made when faced with the unknown, when discipline and courage collided with chaos. And deep inside, Kayla felt the quiet satisfaction of a mission accomplished. The base was safe. The soldiers were changed. And the legend of the janitor who commanded respect without rank would be remembered long after the echoes of gunfire faded. The morning after the battle, the base was calm, almost peaceful, yet charged with a quiet reverence. Soldiers moved through the barracks, eyes sharp but calmer, muscles less tense. They had survived chaos, learned discipline under fire, and discovered something they hadn't expected. The true power of leadership came not from rank, but from experience, courage, and unwavering presence. Kayla Myrick walked slowly through the hallways, mop in hand, her posture relaxed yet commanding. The soldiers instinctively stood as she passed. Not out of fear, not out of obligation, but out of respect, understanding, and gratitude. Each step she took told a story of survival, sacrifice, and unyielding resolve. For the first time, the room didn't feel like a test. It felt like a family forged in fire. Private Lewis approached her cautiously, still shaken from the previous day. "Ma'am, thank you for everything. I don't think I've ever understood what it means to be ready until now." Kayla knelt slightly, eyes meeting his with warmth. "You've always had it. You just didn't know how to trust it. Discipline, courage, teamwork, those things aren't given. You earn them every single day. And today you did." Mendez, previously filled with arrogance, now stood quietly at the back, a newfound humility etched across his face. Even Roderick allowed himself a nod of approval. Every soldier recognized that the janitor they had underestimated was not just a guardian of floors and hallways, but a guardian of life, of readiness, of human resilience. That afternoon, a formal debrief was called. Commanding officers, veterans, and soldiers gathered, and Kayla was quietly acknowledged for her actions. No medals were pinned, no speeches delivered. Recognition came in the form of glances, nods, and the unspoken understanding that her influence had transformed the base. The soldiers had been tested and had survived, not just the attack but their own doubts and fears. Later, as Kayla prepared to leave the barracks, Lewis called out softly, "Ma'am, will you stay?" She paused, mop in hand, a faint smile on her face. "My work here isn't over," she said. "But the hardest lesson isn't about cleaning or drills. It's about knowing that courage lives inside you, and that one day, you'll have to stand for someone else just like I stood for you." As she walked toward the exit, the soldiers watched, standing tall, boots aligned, eyes bright with respect. They understood now why every soldier stood immediately when Kayla entered a room. She had taught them discipline, courage, and trust, not with orders, but with the quiet authority of someone who had faced death and survived, someone who reminded them that ordinary appearances could hide extraordinary strength. Outside, the sun glinted off the base walls, warm and golden. Kayla paused, looking back once. The soldiers were ready, strong, united. She nodded silently to herself and vanished into the morning light, leaving a legacy no rank could ever match. And in every barracks, every training field, every soldier who had witnessed her presence, one truth endured. Sometimes the most unassuming figures carry the weight of heroes, and those who recognize it stand taller, fight harder, and live wiser. The janitor was gone, but the courage she awakened would remain forever.